talking about the delay to the new Sydney Metro. So it was supposed to begin this weekend. That was the plan. The people would be able to go through on Sunday, but who knows when it will finally open. Well, it's tantalisingly close. I've heard a figure of 99% from Transport Minister Joe Halen. But someone who's actually been down to see a lot of these new stations and profiled them for his popular YouTube channel, Building Beautifully, is Sharath Mahendran, who is really full bottle on all things transport in Sydney and beyond. Sharath, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Dom. It's great to be back.
It's very nice to have you back on.
Me.
I had you on the weekend show. We got so many calls, I thought we needed you at this time. We've put out the Sharath signal into the sky to get someone who can explain what's happening. Now, to begin with, you've seen what is in store for Sydney. You've been on tours of the new stations. How impressed are you by what's coming?
Well, I think I made it abundantly clear last time, but I'm genuinely very impressed and extremely excited for this project to open. The scale of the stations is just immense, and I really do think for any listeners who haven't been to any of the open days yet, you really won't understand just how impressive and massive they are until you actually go into them, especially Martin Place. Martin Place, of course, is an existing station on the eastern suburbs and Illawarra line. Now it's going to have a metro connected to it, and it's just a really huge interchange, allowing people to go between them. Such an impressive station, a marvel of engineering and architecture, and that can be applied to all. That description really can describe every single one of the metro stations. It's really impressive.
If you've got a question about the metro, what's planned, and indeed some other ideas for what Sydney and Greater Sydney, we're going to the Central Coast and Newcastle here too, all part of the same network. What could we do better? 1300 222 702. You can text 0467 922 702 as we look ahead in our crystal balls a little bit later on. But let's talk about the current problems, Sharath, because this hasn't gone well.
No.
A firefighter got an electrical shock during a final safety drill. I mean, that sounds far from good.
No, that's definitely not great news. When I saw that yesterday, my heart sunk because it was like piling on bad news after bad news. It's already been a pretty big disappointment that it's not opening on Sunday as was originally planned. Believe me, a lot of people quite disappointed by that. Definitely I am. And hearing about the firefighter, I'm really happy that they are okay, but that's just something that really shouldn't have happened. And I think that safety, of course, needs to absolutely be the number one priority here. And sadly, if that does mean more delays, that's just what we have to accept. And it's very disappointing, but I really hope that, things are sorted out and the metro can open safely when it does eventually open.
Indeed. So if people haven't been to these new stations, give us a bit of a sense of what they're like. In particular, Barangaroo, I think when we last spoke, you were raving about how great it was. And for those who live in Sydney, I mean, being able to catch the train down to the Wharf to see the Sydney Theatre Company or any of the other arts organisations down there, that's something we've never been able to do. But again, this is tantalisingly close, Sharath, isn't it?
It really, it's so tantalisingly close. And Barangaroo, I think I mentioned last time, definitely without a doubt, my favourite new metro station in terms of just the architecture and the engineering behind it. So they've got this beautiful sandstone that just lines the entire walls of the station as soon as you go down there, which is, of course, paying homage to the fact that Barangaroo is right next to Sydney Harbour. And, of course, the Sydney Harbour largely sits on sandstone. And I really have never seen a station as beautiful as that. And I've been to quite a few cities now across Asia with amazing metros. So I reckon that's pretty high praise personally. And I think we are finally getting the world-class metro that we really deserve, even though we have to wait a bit longer for it.
Now, I just went last week. I had a little holiday to Singapore, and they have.
How was that?
It was great, but we went on the MRT trains there.
Yes,
and they are. I was remembering some of your conversation about this and some of the things in your YouTube channel, Sharath Mahendran, because they have an automated trains with safety doors. And I remember you saying that means they can go faster and they're more efficient. So is that what we're expecting? I caught the train to Parramatta this morning, and there were quite a lot of those random delays and go-slows on the line. Is that a thing of the past in this new metro world of ours?
Yeah, well, see, with the trains, and believe me, I've experienced this too, they tend to have to go a lot slower because you have all of these different stopping patterns. You have freight trains, you have the intercity trains coming from the Blue Mountains, you have the express trains, you have all of these things competing for track, and, one of those goes wrong, and as we all know, that happens quite often, sadly, then everything goes wrong. And honestly, Sydney Train's still a very impressive network, and it does work most of the time. We always remember the times that it doesn't, but it does work well most of the time. But Sydney Metro won't have that problem of having different types of trains that are all kind of getting caught up with one another and delaying each other, because they all go to the same place. They all stop at the same places. It's fully automated, so you don't have really any kind of issues in terms of drivers and shortages and things like that. And I think that's, genuinely really exciting. It offers a lot more control.
Once it opens, if you've got a question about public transport in Greater Sydney, all the way up to Newcastle, all the way down to the South Coast, and you want to get Sharath's view on this, 1300 222 702. Sharath, we're broadcasting to Newcastle, and I know in a recent video you went to some of the smaller stations on the Hunter line, and
yes,
let me say,
I did.
some of those are real blips on the network map, aren't they?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah, they really are some very quiet stations up there. There's this one station called Lochinvar, which is just so quiet, and yet it has one of the longest ramps you'll ever see, just going all the way up and down. It takes 3 minutes just to cross the track. It really is quite it's really surreal, because you just have these huge cow paddocks just all around it. There's just truly nothing around it,
Who knows what was once there? And there are dozens and dozens of closed stations too, which we might talk about some other time. But look, I'm keen to focus on the Sydney Metro. We know it's been delayed. We've got questions coming in here on 1300 222 702, or you can text 0467 922 702. Michael is wondering, having walked past the Pitt Street Metro station this week, Michael said it looked like a construction zone. How close to ready is it? And so, Sharath, you've probably got sources all over the place. What's your prediction at this stage for when the thing might actually open? I know you're not speaking in any official capacity. You're a YouTuber, but you're also an expert. What do you think?
Okay, yeah, no. So I actually have been past Gadigal. So it's actually called Gadigal now, not Pitt Street anymore. And yeah, it really does look done. A lot of construction still being cleaned up, but I reckon that's not what has caused the delay, because it's purely really a safety thing rather than the construction. So any construction you're seeing, yes, it might look like, there's still a little bit of time to go for that, but that was all kind of part of the plan. It really is the safety that's the problem here. Now, my estimate, so I've actually, as you can imagine, I'm really excited about this metro opening. So I've done all the calculations and deductions in my head. So next Sunday is the 11th of August. You'd hope maybe they can open it in a week, but the City to Surf is next Sunday. So there's no way they're going to want to open this huge metro line and have all that chaos with a huge running event that is going to get thousands of people into the city. So almost certainly not going to be next Sunday. Which really leaves us with August 18th or August 25th, which are the two other Sundays this month. My guess, personally, they will want to open it in August, and they definitely should want to open it this month, because at least then they've kept it in the same month, and I think people will forget more easily. If it bleeds into September, then I think that's going to leave a much more negative perception in the public mind. I do have to stress that it's completely possible, and safety does have to be the utmost priority. So I can't promise that it's not going to be in September, because it absolutely could be. It all depends on when the safety regulator decides to sign it off. My personal guess is it will be in the next 4 weeks, though, hopefully.
Okay, so look, you're not the Minister for Transport yet, Sharath. Yet.
I wish.
We'll give it some time.
I've done all the deductions.
All right, 1300 222 702. If you've got a question, Bruce in Double Bay has picked up the phone. Hello, Bruce. Bruce, have we got you there? He's been waiting on hold. Oh, there we go. Bruce, that's it. Hello.
Right. Look, my concern is the costing of it all. It's a New South Wales government / private funding, I believe.
You want to know how it's been funded? Well, Sharath, I mean, what's your understanding of the funding model for all of this?
I don't honestly think too much about that, but yeah, it's taxpayer funded. All the money has already been spent on it, and I do believe that that it's cost about $20 billion. So I do admit, quite an expensive project. And this is a problem that does plague Australia to an extent. We do spend a lot on we do pay a lot more for our public transport projects than many other countries. I do think in the long run it is worth it, but certainly maybe an exploration on why our public transport projects cost so much might be in order.
Yeah, look, from what I understand, Bruce, they've made a lot of money by building skyscrapers where the metro stations are, but that doesn't mean that the private sector own the metro. I think it's entirely owned by the government, but we can confirm that later. Let's go to Greg. Greg in Ryde. Hello, Greg. Have we got you there, Greg? What's your question?
Okay, two questions. First question is, what is the length of the service? How long are they going to run? Are they going to run into the early morning hours? 'Cause I'm thinking of summertime, New Year's Eve, things like that, and family groups who want to patronise the service.
Yep, so the hours of operation. Sharath, do you know anything about that?
No. So the hours of operation, you can already kind of get an idea of that from the Sydney Metro Northwest. I don't have the exact numbers, but I believe it's roughly 5 a.m. to like roughly midnight or 1 a.m. So it's pretty long hours. On Friday and Saturday nights, they do tend to run it all the way up to like 2 a.m., maybe even 3 a.m. Don't quote me on that, but definitely New Year's Eve and important days like that, they will probably run it longer as they see fit.
But I guess also it all being underground pretty much, or a lot of it being underground, they could run it for longer hours without inconveniencing local residents near the train lines. That might be better.
Yeah, exactly.
Greg, another question?
Yes, and the second question is, what is the level of security that will be on these trains? As a father of young children, I'm concerned about yahoos acting up on the trains, drinking, smoking, being aggressive, that sort of thing.
Okay, yahoos. Sharath, is there a policy for yahoos that you're aware of?
I can't say I've ever heard a question like that before. I guess they probably address it the way that they address it on any train system. They'll, just if you're seeing that type of behaviour, call the cops. I personally have not experienced that on the metro or on a train line, even for that matter. But certainly they have security in the control room. I'm sure that it's monitoring all of that, and there's plenty of metro staff at each station who I'm sure will be looking out for that.
So no drivers, presumably no conductors or anything like that. So no staff on the train, but staff at the stations.
Yeah, there's usually staff at the stations, and honestly, I again, don't quote me, but I have seen staff on the metros sometimes. So I think it's overall quite a safe system, and I think the safety of the public should be maximised.
It is 14 minutes to 1 o'clock. Dom Knight here on the afternoon show on 702 ABC Radio Sydney, as well as ABC Radio in Newcastle on the Central Coast, talking to Sharath Mahendran of the Building Beautifully YouTube channel, a big expert on public transport in Greater Sydney. And look, I'm keen to ask about the sort of big picture vision as well as all of this. Michael has texted in this question. I want to know about the Central Coast and Newcastle line. In your view, Sharath, he wants to know, will we ever see travel times below 2 hours between Sydney and Newcastle? What could be done realistically without becoming a utopia episode about high-speed rail? A lot of my friends have quit their jobs in Sydney just because commuting has become exhausting. I know this keeps coming up, this vision of the high-speed rail.
Yeah.
But the metro is faster than the traditional train lines, but it's not a high-speed rail line, is it?
No. The metro is definitely not a high-speed rail line, I wish, but it is going to save a lot of time. In terms of getting to Newcastle, I don't know if there really is a way to cut it down to 2 hours without turning into a utopia episode, but there are definitely ways to cut down the time. The train line definitely does wind its way on up to Newcastle. I think there's been talk of quadruplicating the track the whole way, or at least part of the way, to allow trains to overtake one another. I think that would definitely help. But I do without doing too much research into this, I do suspect that a high-speed rail is probably going to be the only real way to do that. And I think that that's still many decades off, if it even ever happens. The Albanese government have committed to at least investigating it, though, and they are certainly doing that right now. So we'll just have to wait and see what the business case says for that.
Yeah, and that's new tracks, new alignment, new route, right? That's just a whole thing.
Absolutely. There's no way they'll be able to use the existing track because, like a lot of our old train tracks, they were all built for steam trains, so they're all windy, just definitely not not suitable for high-speed trains.
So no Shinkansen to Newcastle as opposed to the other name for the current line, which I can't say because it's a bit rude. Okay, if you've got a question, 1300 222 702. Sharath is at your service for a little while longer. Paul in Marrickville, hello. Paul. Paul's been holding on. We're having trouble with the phone today. Hello, Paul. How are you? Paul's not there. We'll try and figure out what the deal is with Paul. He's got a question about stations in Sydney. I've got a question for you, Sharath, which is...
Certainly, Dom.
All these new train stations that have been built, I find it a bit strange that, for instance, they've got Gadigal Station. I mean, lovely idea to have the name, but it's essentially right next to Town Hall. It could have been Town Hall. The Victoria Cross Station in North Sydney could have just been North Sydney. In other countries, if you had another line that's near an existing station, you just extend the station. What's the thinking, do you reckon, in giving them all these new names, particularly confusing names? Like, if you don't know North Sydney quite well, you've no idea what Victoria Cross means, for instance.
You're definitely onto something there. I do think that they definitely do sometimes name the station differently. I've thought of an example in Hong Kong where they have Tsim Sha Tsui. I'm sure I've said that wrong, but they have a station called Tsim Sha Tsui and then another station called East Tsim Sha Tsui, even though it's like right next to it. So definitely sometimes they do give it a different name. But in this case, I think the explanation's much simpler, which is that, yes, Victoria Cross and North Sydney are like companion stations, but Victoria Cross is still a good 5-minute walk from North Sydney. And similarly with Gadigal, I do admit Gadigal is closer to Town Hall, but it's a good 2 or 3 minute walk. And Gadigal's not linked at all to Town Hall. Victoria Cross is not linked at all to North Sydney.
Yeah.
Now, I do admit maybe the naming could have been a bit better. I personally really like the name Gadigal, and Victoria Cross definitely sounds nice. Maybe helping with geography, but I do feel that it should be all right. I mean, Wynyard, for example, there's no suburb called Wynyard in Australia, but that has just been accepted to be that general locality, and I do suspect Gadigal will just slowly come to be the locality around there. I think people will just accept that that's how it is. Same with Victoria Cross.
Yeah, I mean, it's a nice way to honour the traditional owners. I'm just thinking in other cities, if it's close enough for a travelator between them underground, but as you say, it might be more of a duplication. Maybe it's supposed to be separate so that people realise.
It is indeed. I have a reason for that because I'm pretty sure that they wanted to keep them separate so that if one of the stations is down or there's an evacuation or something, then at least the other station can still operate. And I think it's important to have that redundancy.
Curious to know what the thinking is. Anyway, Paul in Marrickville, we might have you now. Hello.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. What's your question for Sharath?
Look, my question is, so at the moment the Bankstown line runs from Sydenham through St Peters and Erskineville. So if they're going to close the Bankstown line down while they rebuild it, so what when they open the metro, like the metro doesn't stop at Erskineville and St Peters, so what trains are going to stop there? They're pretty busy stations.
Ooh, that's a good question. So I'm pretty sure that Erskineville will now be serviced by the T4, and I'm fairly sure it's the same with St Peters. That will mean a slower commute for T4 commuters, which is, of course, a bit unfortunate. But, you know, with these transit projects, there's always a trade-off, I guess, and no transit project can be perfect, unfortunately. But
So
any T3 commuters can change at Sydenham.
Okay, thanks, Paul,
there.
for that. Good to have you with us. 1300 222 702. Lots of texts coming in on 0467 922 702 at 8 minutes to 1 o'clock. It's Dom Night on ABC Radio in Sydney, Central Coast and Newcastle. Sharath Mahendran of the Building Beautifully YouTube channel is on board. He's got lots of videos about transport in Sydney that explain all these things in great detail. Very, very helpful service that he provides. Someone's texted in, it's fantastic, I can't wait for the Sydney Metro. I live in Riverstone. Now I'll be able to catch a bus to Tallawong Station and travel straight into Central. Someone's texted in to say that there's a Wynyard in Tasmania. Thank you, Ken in Wattlegrove, for that.
My bad.
It might mean
I should have said
Vineyard.
Australia.
I don't know what the deal is. And someone else says, look, at Barangaroo Infrastructure, New South Wales, we've just closed the lifts down to the station from Argyle Street for the next 3 years. Brilliant timing. Why isn't there a new lift from the station to High Street? So I don't know what's going on there, but that sounds unfortunate if we can confirm that.
That I'm not so sure about.
Yeah, King's Cross, St Pancras, right next to each other, but different names. Well, it's the one station, though, on the underground, Sarah. Anyway, someone else says, I've used the Northwest Metro. I found it fast and efficient. I want to see more Metro. I've also used the light rail, which is pleasant and did wonders for George Street, but it's not fast enough. for an efficient transport option. Do you think light rail's off the table as a transport option? Now, Sharath, here in Parramatta, where I'm broadcasting from, there's a new light rail line testing at the moment. There's also been a proposal for light rail up Parramatta Road past Sydney University and beyond. What's your perception of light rail and how the system we have is working?
Oh, I think light rail is a brilliant option, and I think it can be a bit reductive. And of course, there's always a temptation to think of light rail like this, but it can be a bit reductive to just think of transport as how fast does it go? What's the speed that it goes at? Because sometimes it's more important than that. You look at the CBD light rail, L2 and L3, and yeah, it's a brilliant light rail. Yes, it is slow, but it's really helped to pedestrianise George Street and make it much more lively. And imagine if it was going at like 60 kilometres an hour, you wouldn't be able to cross back and forth across George Street. So really, again, transit projects can never be perfect. You always have a bit of a trade-off. Now, I don't think light rail is out of the picture, and I definitely don't think it should be, because you need to have those smaller projects that have more stops, go a little bit slower between train stations to kind of supplement train stations, because you can't just have, we can't just be building metros everywhere. I think the Parramatta light rail would just not have really worked if they just built a metro there instead. And I think as a light rail, it's brilliant. I suspect this might be what you're leading into, which is the Parramatta Road light rail, which was recently proposed by Altrac, which is planned to run from Burwood, I believe, all the way to Green Square, which I think is a brilliant idea. And, maybe it'll be slow. Hopefully it's not too slow. But, it'll really help to connect a lot of those communities along Parramatta Road, really revitalise what is probably, in my opinion, one of the worst roads in Sydney.
Yeah.
Just so many, abandoned warehouses and abandoned storefronts. And just imagine you put a light rail in there. That's going to encourage people to live there, connect people to the city better, faster. And Green Square, the densest suburb in Australia, I believe, definitely is a better transport solution than the one train station they have right now.
Okay, so that's a possibility. Well, here in Parramatta, the light rail will mean that we can go from where we are at Parramatta Square, quick pop down to the hospital if needed, but also we can go to Little India for lunch. It's only a couple of stops.
Exactly.
The university's not far at all. Now, Bruce from Double Bay has rung back, and in fact, other people, Jed, we don't have time to take the calls, but I know they want to ask about the airport line. I know you're passionate about the route of the airport line.
I am.
What do you reckon needs to happen?
Oh, with the Western Sydney Airport Metro, yeah. I've done a video about this for anyone who's listening and wants to find out more, but my opinion is that they really need to do something about the fact that the line doesn't go to Leppington or to Glenfield, because imagine you live in Liverpool, Campbelltown, Cabramatta, anywhere in the general southwest of Sydney. You don't really have a good way to get to the new airport. In fact, I'm pretty sure that it's going to take an hour by bus to get from Campbelltown to the new airport, which is pretty outrageous when you consider that it only takes about 50 minutes to get from Campbelltown to the current airport on the airport line. So they really do need to do something about that, probably extend the metro to Glenfield or extend the heavy rail line from Leppington to the new airport, which I personally think the latter is a better idea. It will be cheaper and it allows I won't get into that, but Yeah,
that's all in the video. But also the route, the other aspect is, it just doesn't serve this kind of north-south area. Is that the problem?
It's not the north-south, but more so just the southwest. The current metro route really services it helps St Mary's, it'll help Parramatta, it'll help Penrith, but it doesn't really help Campbelltown, Liverpool. And see, the thing is, the new airport is in Liverpool Council, so it doesn't make sense. That it's not really, if you're in Liverpool, you're not really going to be able to get there. So I really think that the government need to make that priority number one, because transport links to an airport really make or break an airport.
Yeah,
we don't want to have a situation like Melbourne where you can't get to the airport by train,
Now, look, if you watch the videos, you can see the maps and it makes a lot more sense. Final question, Sharath, before we hit the news. If we made you Minister for Transport, and Chris Minns may ring in at some point, I don't know.
That'd be great.
What would be your big project? What do you think? Blue sky, Greater Sydney region, what would you build? Money, no object.
Ooh, I do always think about this, and I always have an answer ready, because this is my genuine passion project, would be to have a new north-south train line that links, or metro line, that links all of the train lines in Sydney. My personal preferred route would be from Norwest, up in the northwest of Sydney on the metro, all the way down south to Cogra. And so you'd be linking places like Parramatta, you'd be linking the banks, you'd be linking Bankstown, you'd be linking places on the T8, all the way down to Cogra. It could even go to Hurstville. I'm not going to get into, I don't know exactly what the route should be, but definitely some sort of north-south line. Because if you ask anyone who lives in say, I don't know, Hurstville or Sutherland, and you ask them how long does it take them to get to, say, Bankstown or Parramatta, they're going to tell you it takes ages because you need to go all the way into Central, then all the way back out to Parramatta. So imagine you had a train line that just allowed you to shortcut that, bypass the city, go around the city instead, and get to your destination much faster. We don't need to be so focused on Sydney CBD, you know? There's other places.
Well, now that I work in Parramatta, Sheriff, I couldn't agree more. Look, we're going to hit the news in a minute, but we've just got a call from the federal member for Macarthur, Dr. Mike Freelander from Campbelltown, I'm told. Hello, Dr. Mike Freelander, welcome.
Hello.
How are you? Look, I've just been hearing all the comments about the link to Western Sydney Airport from the southwest. It's an absolute tragedy they haven't continued that line on.
All right.
It's going to cost a lot more to reinvent it. You're going to have to get all the machinery back in again. It's just a tragedy to me that it hasn't been done properly.
Can we just put a pin in that, Dr. Mike Freelander? Can we chat to you after the news?
I'd love to talk to you after the news.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Hang on there. And Sheriff Mahendran, so good to have you on. Love having your expertise. Your YouTube channel is building beautifully. Check it out. It is 1 p.m. here at ABC Radio Sydney and in the Central Coast of Newcastle. And that's time for the latest ABC News.